Joe Root has announced his resignation as England's captain after 64 tests, series wins, South Africa away, India at home, 2 series wins against Sri Lanka. No Ashes, of course, but in those 64 tests he won 27 of them, which is actually a record. And quite remarkably, I think, he scored 1400s in his time as England's captain. All that responsibility on his shoulders without much support at the other end. So I've got Vic Marks with me and I've got Phil Tufnell with me. And we're going to chat away through, first of all, I guess, that news, the ramifications, and of course who, I guess, might be the person that succeeds him. But just an early thought, let's start with you, Tuffers. English cricket at the moment, I mean, I likened it earlier to like an old tanker, massive tanker that's just drifting away in the wrong direction. There's nobody in charge. There's void wherever you look. They've won one of their last 17 test matches, and now the captain has gone. So what a situation for whoever these new personnel are going to be to inherit.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be done quickly, doesn't it, as well? Because as you say, it's just drifting along at the moment, and now Joe's stepped down. I think one thing you've got to say about Joe, that it never affected his performance. As you say, he's gone from strength to strength with the bat, hugely passionate about the job, loyal to his teammates, would do anything for them. And I think, looking back, I don't think he really sort of got the support. Really, I think he was a bit unlucky in a funny sort of way. I mean, you say there his record speaks for itself. Longest standing captain, most games, most wins and things. But the white ball reset, sort of everything was concentrated on that a little bit. And perhaps sort of Test match cricket was pushed to the back post, so to speak. And then also COVID yes. and things like this. So he must have been sitting there going, "Crikey, O'Reilly, I've been dealt a bit of a rough hand." But no, hugely passionate guy, hugely proud guy, loved captaining his country, and well done. And now it's time to sort of, go and sit at first slip and have a
pile
bit
on the runs.
Yeah, and pile on the runs. And I'm sure he's going to be a great foil for the next captain. Use all of his experience.
Yeah. Victor, any great surprise?
Well, the timing was a bit of a surprise, but I'm viewing it a bit like Tuffers, actually. It's almost a good news story. I think it was appropriate for him to stand down. And I don't think he could have been pushed because there's nowhere around to push him. And I think it's right initially to focus on the fact that he's never going to be regarded as the greatest England captain we've ever had, even if he gets another go at it. But he wasn't bad, and he was totally devoted to that job. Yeah. He's done it over a huge period of time. He did it with great dignity. There were moments... Yeah. I remember in Australia when we were losing, but the game was going the wrong way, all those nasty incidents. And I remember Joe saying, "I feel responsible for the behaviour of my team." When Steve Smith was saying, "Well, the umpires didn't bother, so it must have been all right." That sort of thing. So I got a lot of time for him as a person. I think he's done that job to the best of his ability. I also think it will help English cricket, actually. One little bit of clarification. And he is, by a massive margin, the best player in that England team. In fact, he will go down as one of the best players England have had since the war. And what they desperately need from him now are those runs. And I think the chances of him scoring more runs now are probably enhanced.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, he could have resigned after the Ashes. They had this red ball reset, so-called, which I think everyone got a bit fed up of that, to be honest, that phrase. But they did. They tried to move on, dropped Broad and Anderson. We don't know how much involved Root was in that decision, but they did that. And then, I was there that last day in Grenada, and it all fell in a heap. I'm not sure, really, there's any way out of it from that point on.
Well, my guess is that he kept the job after the Ashes for one very good reason, which we'll get onto. It's very difficult to establish who should do the job next. If there had been a really strong candidate floating around in that team post-Ashes, I suspect they would have arranged for him to go, or he would have gone. But he kept going because there wasn't anyone else obvious.
Yeah, but then also I think that's the mark of the man. Could have easily have gone after the Ashes, as you said, but then sat down there, brushed himself off, and said, "No, I want to carry on. I want to take this team forward, and I want to try and make something and so show the right path for English cricket." But I then think that after the West Indies, that was perhaps just a step too.
Well, no, the West Indies ultimately was a failed expedition. I was watching it from a fair distance, but England played on 2 flat pitches where it would have been a disgrace if we'd lost the games, in fact, and so people scored runs. It was a batsman's sort of haven. And then we got to the last match, spiky match, where we was always going to decide the series, and we fell short. So there was no great obvious progress on the field.
I was interested in Joe's statement about where he mentions his family very closely, and he's a big family man, but it just demonstrates, I think, how big this job is, and we'll go on to who might replace him, but it is not just a question of leading 10 other blokes out onto a field. I mean, all the background stuff, the responsibility that goes with it, just the 24 hours a day that you are living that job.
Yeah, well, I've been through a few captains when I played, and you do see it physically start to,
yes.
The shoulders start to get a bit stooped and the grey hairs start to appear. So
you never shut the door on it. I mean, it's
no,
all the time in your life.
No, and it's great when things are going well, but then inevitably there are going to be downs as well, and it does. And you were looking at Joe. You said yourself that he looked a bit,
Oh, he looked gaunt. He looked absolutely careworn.
Yes, that's right. So I think he's probably sat down and said, "Well, listen, I've given it my all," as Vic said earlier on, and I just don't think perhaps there's a lot more for me to be done apart from to go out there and score the run.
He'll go back into the ranks, and that character will come back, and I'm sure he'll score a stack of runs. But what do England do now? I mean, it's this crazy situation in which at the moment there's no one in place who is going to make this decision.
Do you fancy it going, John?
Well, you might as well toss the hat in. Chairman, you can do what you like. Do what you like. But bear in mind that the managing director, if the names that we see in the hat are proven to be correct, is likely to be somebody who's never done this before. And what a decision. They've got to appoint a coach and a captain, having never been involved in anything like this before. We think, if it is someone like Rob Key, for instance, it's a huge decision.
Well, you're right, but I have this notion that sometimes we imbue on the captaincy too much, and we expect we've got to find someone to take us forward over the next 3 or 4 years. Well, that's not going to work. We aren't going to find that. So you've got to look. I would appoint a captain, or once we've got a cricket director, blah, blah, blah. And I think, in a bit of a throwback, I'd say, I want you to do the New Zealand series. Yeah. Three tests. Yeah. And I mentioned this to you the other night. One of England's greatest captains, your old mate, Ray Illingworth, was appointed as a pure stopgap. Cowdrey broke his leg or something, and everyone thought Illingworth the perfect stopgap. He's 37. He's a borderline Test cricketer, but he's a very shrewd old boy. Of course, he did it so well that he ended up doing it for 3 or 4 years and won the Ashes. Now, I'm not saying that whoever gets appointed is going to necessarily do that, but you sometimes get surprised as well. Yeah. So I don't think one should panic about, the future of English cricket, what are we going to do in 2024? Let's just try and sort out what you do in the first half of 2022. And things will happen that surprise you.
You could put on for 4 tests. You could do the 3 New Zealand tests and that one off India test. Yeah, and then you can have there's a break, and you can have let's see where we are.
There's only one person, isn't there? Come on, there's only one person. It's got to be Ben Stokes. But is that gonna? There's always that worry
of fitness worry about him at the moment.
Well, there you go. I mean, if you're thinking of Stuart Broad, bowlers, crikey, they can get injured. I mean, it is a bit of a worry. But I can see Ben Stokes, but is that going to take anything away from his sort of cavalier sort of way he goes about playing the cricket? You don't want to then lump all of that weight on his shoulders. I mean,
go through both of them. Flintoff, Peterson, he put him in there. These huge characters. It never worked.
Well, no, I think it's harder to go outside now because in the old days they plucked out Illy and they would plucked out Mike Denness more or less.
Mike Brearley was always
Brearley was in the team, but he,
always under scrutiny.
Handy decision. But it's more difficult to do that now when you've got the Lions structure and all these development groups. It's hard to go out and say, well, who won the county championship last year? Warwickshire, Will Rhodes, England captain. Well, I think that's asking a bit much. So I don't think you can go outside. I think
James Vince is someone it's a name that's being thrown around, but he's had 2 goes at Test cricket now. Yeah.
I mean, curiously, I think there are 3 candidates, all inside, all very flawed in several ways. Ben Stokes, don't know whether he wants to do it, and his body's falling apart a bit, but, Stuart Broad, captained England quite a lot, actually, in T20 cricket, but this will be a slightly different challenge. And the other one I'd toss out, but you'll stare at me as a West Country bumpkin, Josh Butler. If he was in the team, he'd be a very strong candidate. He has been part of that team,
yes,
and obviously was not in the Caribbean, and he's had a difficult time, but nonetheless, he has qualities. He has leadership qualities, and he's played 50-odd Test matches. He knows what it's about. Yeah. So I would toss him in as a candidate as well.
A long-termer type candidate as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're still slightly plucking at straws, but he has got some of the attributes you want, and he is respected within that group, and he's a bright bloke. But the trouble is, he can't quite bat as we'd like him to. So I can't go beyond that at the moment. But if you say to yourself, and you think, oh, this is hopeless, but if you do say to yourself, hang on a minute, we're talking about, at the moment, 3 or 4 Test matches, and let's just see how it goes.
Yeah. Another problem, and we are used to this in recent years, is that there is no breeding ground for captains anyway. I mean, Joe Root, I think, had captained Yorkshire once. Yeah. But Michael, Alistair Cook, and I don't think captained Essex at all. Absolutely. I mean, it is an issue, though. I mean, how do you learn? How do you it's not like the Railingworth days when he kept captain for so long. They just don't do it anymore. So you really are having to take a punt, Tuffers, on who it could possibly be.
Absolutely, and you've got to look, at character, a little bit of experience as well. But cricket is one of the only team games, isn't it, where the captain is such a huge part of the side, isn't it? I mean, they make all the decisions on the field. They make decisions off the field. I know that's sort of been taken away slightly now. I mean, back in my day, the captain did everything. But. They've got to have that little bit of experience and that little bit of sort of cricketing know-how and nous. You just can't go out there and pick anyone to be a captain because it's tough, it's hard work.
I'll offer this thought. You've been around a very long time in this game. Have you ever experienced English cricket to be in quite such a state at the moment where there is nobody?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. I mean, what about dear old 1988? You were just coming to the end of your career then, and the 4 captains in one summer. Embers did a game. Yes. Chris Cowdrey got plucked out. Gucci said he didn't want to do it, and then he sort of changed his mind at the end, and Gatt had to go. So I think that's quite a good precedent. They didn't have quite so many people in charge, as many people post to fill. I mean, it is bizarre that we find ourselves without all these decision makers.
The people in place to make the appointments. I mean, the people haven't been appointed to make the appointments.
well, that is true, but nonetheless, I think actually that was the year, without wanting to personalise it too much. It was 1988, and this is another stat that affects me. But I think in that summer, I was the 34th man to play for England because I played in a one-day international towards the end of the season. I was the 34th person to be picked for England. It's not one I'm very proud of. So we have had moments of chaos.
Yeah. I think go back to the point, though, as we sort of wrap it up, I think it does feel the right decision for Root to have made.
Absolutely. And because I don't want to invest so much in the captaincy, I could envisage a situation where in 3 or 4 years' time, when Joe Root scored another 4,000 Test runs and we're stuck for someone, Joe, could you take him out for this series? And he'd be well equipped to do it. Curiously, I'm not advocating he'd definitely come back, Joe, but that could happen. So I think this is good. Essentially, this is good news. One minor clarification amidst all the fog that surrounds England.
I think that's unlikely. There we go. Anyway, a huge, not just a blank sheet of paper, but there's 3 or 4 blank sheets of paper that have to be stared at by somebody. We don't know who yet, and all these positions filled. So it's a fascinating time. It's an interesting time, and there's certainly been a lot of debate around about English cricket and its future. Once again, as we build up to the first Test match against New Zealand. Thank you very much to Vic Marks and Phil Tufnell. Now, Kevin Howells has been speaking to Yorkshire's interim director of cricket, Darren Gough.
Despite everything, it's still a bit of a shock, I think, to hear and receive the news this morning. But I just wondered whether, to start with, Darren, you think Joe has made the right decision?
Well, it's his decision, so he'll believe it's the right one. Me personally, from being in that dressing room and seeing Joe's leadership skills and how well he's respected by the players and the coaching staff, it surprised me this morning. I was there having breakfast and I saw it come up in breaking news. So I was surprised. I think 27 Test wins as captain and the amount of times he's basically carried England's batting attack. during that period, the last 17 matches, which everybody's focusing on, these last 17, one win. You've got to have the team around you to get them wins as well. And I think you could argue some of the selections have not been right. You could argue some injuries have gone against him. The timing of everything's gone against him. And losing against Australia, listen, I know that's people always judge a captain on how he does against Australia, and I think that's wrong. There's been plenty of guys who have captained England who have not won an Ashes series. And the best captain I ever played under was Nasser Hussain. He never won an Ashes series. So we are very blind in judging captains on just beating Australia. I think he's been a good captain for England. Yes, you can argue any captain at any stage in their career would have made a mistake on the field. Of course, might have made the wrong call at the toss of the coin, ball or bat, when they should have bowled. But I think overall, I think he's a terrific leader. But I think he's been judged on the last 17 games.
Let me put the question this way, if I may, then. If it's the right decision for Joe, and we hope it is, he genuinely believes it's the right decision for him, is it the right decision for England at this stage?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, because I think we're all due to say whether it be a new coach, a new director of cricket be appointed. All I can think is, but someone's in place and they've had that conversation with him, and Joe's decided it's not for him. That could have happened, or it could purely be Joe's had time to come home, spend time with his family, assess what's gone on this winter, and say, nah, it's time to go. So you could look at it like that. But I believe, obviously, Ben Stokes is a terrific cricketer, and again, another strong personality who is he's almost like a player that is infectious on everyone else. He's a natural leader, as in within a dressing room. To actually be that person in the dressing room is a great leader. To be out on the field doing everything, as well as being the best all-rounder in the world, it's going to be very difficult for him. But he's the natural successor. There is other guys who would have been in for a shout, but they're not in the team at the moment. They've been dropped or they're not in the team. So it's going to be a very difficult choice to who will be the captain. Well, the natural one is obviously Ben Stokes, but it's very big call to give Ben the job.
64 tests in charge, a record number of tests. What's the legacy for Joe as England?
Well, there you just said it. 27 test wins, and during that period, he kept getting 100 after 100 after 100 after 100. I think he's been a terrific leader. He led from the front. And I'm disappointed he stepped down, but if he feels as though it's the right choice for him, so be it. I just hope England get it right in the next appointment now as captain. I think it's an hard act to follow, but if you're the captain coming in, one win in 17, you're probably thinking it's not a bad time to take over as captain.
You've touched on this, just explore a little bit more this idea of whether he's had a fair crack at the whip. I mean, 64 tests, a record number, so you could argue he has. But yeah. I mean, in more recent times, when the results haven't been going, COVID, obviously he'll be involved with the selection, but not always what everything else is going on in the background with the organisation and the build-up to that selection. The quality of players he's had at his disposal. Do you think he's had a fair crack of the whip in recent times?
Well, like you say, you've kind of said it. It was 64 matches. He's had a fair crack at it, I would say. He's done brilliant to be captain of England that many times. But I think what's happened the last few years with COVID and everything, I think all of them have been could argue to have been treated harshly, whether it be Giles, whether it be Root, whether it be Silverwood. During those times, in bubbles, to be a leader, I would say has been pretty difficult. And in that time, the problem is they probably said it was all about going to the Ashes and competing and possibly winning. That was always this mission statement from when they took over in 2019. And to go to the Ashes and be as poor as we were wasn't ideal for him. And then to lose in the West Indies. But again, I think you only have to look. There's other factors in this. Injuries to Wood and Archer, two unbelievable fast bowlers who can knock away any team. You've seen the power of pace in this game when Harry Shroud got it right for 2 overs. It makes a difference, and to lose them for Joe Root was massive. Then for Broad and Anderson not to be on a tour when they've got over 1,000 test wickets. There's been some strange decisions. I don't know who's responsible for them, but I think he's been a good leader for England. Yes, we can sit here and argue about odd fielding position here and there and the odd decision here and there. if you captain 64 times, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes in any game, any captain in any era.
From an England point of view, finally, you could say perhaps it's bad luck if you lose a chairperson, along with an MD, along with an international coach, and now you've lost an England Test captain. Are we now moving into a little bit of a chaotic situation?
I think it is chaotic. I think it is. And we've seen other few chaotic instances that are happening around the country at this moment in time. But I think with English cricket now, it looks like it almost is a clean slate. They're starting from the beginning. They've got some big calls to make now. I'd like to think if they're going to do this, they pick players not on their reputations as names, but if they're going to do this now, it's a perfect opportunity to look around the county game and pick players who deserve to be picked. Whether there's debutants involved in that, this is the perfect opportunity to now select an England side on pure ability and not on names.
So no more Anderson, no more Broad.
Well, on ability, they're still the best. So when it comes down to ability, if they'd underperformed, Broad, when you look at him in Australia, his last test matches for England, yes, on pitches that were lively, and you wouldn't mind bowling on them, I think he performed. Anderson, whenever he's played for England, I can't remember the last time he let England down. And I think if they're bowling well, which we don't know yet, because for some reason they've been rested the first 2 games of the season after not playing since January. Again, not something I would have made. I'm sure them two are itching to get out there and show on these pitches at this time of the year, but they can still perform. But come next week, I think Broad and Anderson will be playing for their counties, and I would expect strong performances. But if they start the season and they're taking wickets, which I expect them to do, they get picked. If they're not taking wickets, they don't get picked. It's as simple as that for me.
Well, there's one man who knows Joe Root very well, of course, in Darren Gough. Here's another, and a former England captain in himself, Michael Vaughan.
Oh, I think it's been a time that he's given the job everything that you would have expected from someone like Joe Root, completely dedicated to the position of being the England captain, a great ambassador for the game. I've said it many times. I just think he is the player, the person that all young people should try and follow. He's such a great ambassador for the sport, but it hasn't been without its difficulties. And I look at his tenure and think, back to many of us ex-England captains, whether it's Alistair Cook, Andrew Strauss, myself, Nasser Hussain, Mike Atherton, and I don't think he's had a great hand. I don't think the ECB have helped him out at all in terms of what they've delivered for the Red Bull team under Joe Root's watch. His first 2.5 years was pretty much geared towards him being the Test captain, but they were desperate to win the World Cup in 19. All the eggs were put in the white ball basket. It worked. It got them that World Cup. Then it was about the Ashes after that, because the Ashes in 19 was a drawn series, but one that you would have expected England to put up a better fight. But the kind of to and fro between the red ball and the white ball teams around that period made it look like a bit of a disjointed effort. They played an Ashes series just after a World Cup final, and then it was all about the Ashes series in Australia, and then COVID hit. And it's been very difficult for all teams around the world to manage the COVID situation. And it's inevitable that it's come to this. I saw in Australia, I certainly saw in the West Indies an England captain that he was drained. You could see that in his face. You could see that in his interviews. And the one thing that he can do, he can walk away knowing that he's given it absolutely everything. He'll be disappointed that he's not got an Ashes series to his name, but I think now he can become continue to be the senior pro in the team. What are England going to miss? I don't think they're going to miss a great deal. I do think they're going to get his runs. He's going to keep scoring a huge amount of runs, which is going to be great for the side. He's going to continue to be this great role model within the team, a senior pro, and he's going to be able to do that without the nonsense of the captaincy. So I think he's in a nice position now.
Obviously, you're not going to change your mind about the fact that you feel it's the right thing, this decision. But bearing in mind what you've just talked about, all the influences, the outside influences, if you like, and everything that didn't go his way. Do you feel the frustration for him that perhaps he did initially say that he wanted to carry on because he feels that perhaps a reset, a different environment, he could do a better job?
Oh, yeah. I saw from that interview at the end of the Caribbean, that wasn't an interview of him believing everything that he was saying. I could just see in his face and in his voice that he was just saying what possibly people wanted to hear. He's also got to be honest with himself. There's been a huge amount of mistakes. He can't just blame the kind of the ECB in terms of their positioning of the Red Bull team. COVID has been an issue, but selectorally, England have got it wrong for quite a while. Tactically, there's been quite a few occasions of recent times where Joe himself has just not managed to grab the game and get England over the line in tight situations. So he'll own up to those kind of mistakes. But, I think it is the right time. When you're bringing in a new director, you're bringing in a new coach. I think a new captain is probably what the Test match team need. This Red Bull reset that I keep hearing, it's just utter nonsense. Kev, I just don't get this PR kind of slogan that we keep hearing, the Red Bull reset. That's just an admittance of guilt that the ECB have took their eye off Test match cricket for quite a while, and it won't be just by saying it out into the public domain that there's going to be a Red Bull reset that suddenly it's going to change. It's going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, a few changes and tweaks here and there. And I just think with a new captain at the helm and a new coach and a new director of cricket, it probably gives the Test match team a clean slate to try and move forward. But, from the players that they have and the situation that they find themselves, I don't see it being a quick fix. I don't suddenly see England racing up the rankings towards that top end. I don't see them hammering teams at home like we used to. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for the Test match team to start to be remodelled and just to get more competitive. I mean, the one thing that I'll look back at Joe's reign and probably one that he'll look back at and think, what went wrong with the mentality side of the team? Because there were so many times where over the last few years this England Test match team have just collapsed. Collapsed in a heap from nowhere, particularly with the batting hand. And that's not down to the captain, that's down to the individuals that have been batting for him. But, when you're the leader of the side, you want to kind of judge your team when it gets tough and can you get through tough situations. And for quite a long period now, this Test match team has been one that once they've been put under pressure, whether it's been from a little bit of movement in the pitch, a bit of swing, a bit of spin, once they lose one wicket, you always have felt, Kev, that they're going to lose another and there's going to be a collapse. And that's been a common trend of the Test match team. And that's something that the new captain, coach and director are going to have to get right quickly.
You're going for Ben Stokes?
Yep, I don't see anyone else. I mean, and it's not that I don't think Ben's going to potentially be a very good England captain. There just isn't anybody else out there. You could say Stuart Broad for a short period, the interim. That seems to be quite a trendy saying in sport these days. But I just think in Ben Stokes, you've got someone that clearly has got a very smart cricket brain. He's going to give it everything. He's certainly going to have the respect of the players around him. I guess the kind of the turmoil that an all-rounder can give you as a captain is that all-rounder might try and do everything himself, but that's when you need a good captain, a good coach around you, a good senior set of players, and someone like Joe Root actually I think now becomes very, very important for Ben Stokes if he is the captain, because it'd be someone like Joe, and they're very close as a partnership, to just whisper in Ben's ear when he's trying to do too much. And I think someone like Ben, his downfall might be that if he takes over, he wants to do everything. And that includes selection, coaching, organisation, future planning. And that it's times like that you've got to have someone around you say, look, Ben, just concentrate on what you're really good at. And that's out in the field, making decisions and trying to just give us your performance. And if he can perform like we know he can, he'll lead the team by example.
So it's Ben Stokes, but with some concern over workload, increased pressure. And you say, Ben may want to take on the job and do everything. Well, quite frankly, at the moment, Michael, he would have to do everything because there's nobody else in position to do it. How do you view the ECB position that not only has it now lost a Test captain, it hasn't got a chief selector, it hasn't got an MD of England cricket, it hasn't got a chair there at the ECB as well. Have you ever known a time like this?
No, and I've never known a time, Kevin, when I've looked at a Test match team and realistically, I can't see one future England captain. You know, you can go back over the years. There was Michael Allerton that came through. He got the tag of Feck. You know, I came through. There was Trescothick around. Then there was Strauss around. Then there was Alistair Cook. Then there was Joe Root. At the minute, I don't see. There's the likes of Zach Crawley. There's Ollie Pope. That are good young players, but I don't see them having that tag of Feck at the minute, and that's a real concern for the Test match side. You know, Ben Stokes is everything in a person and in a player that you want, but he will need a lot of support around him, because when you've got that all-rounder tag and they've got that persona that they think, and more often than not they can do everything, but he will need some smart people around him just to say, look, Ben, just don't try and do everything, because your mind and your mentality will frazzle if you try and do everything. He'll just need a little bit of a senior core around him just to give him a few little pointers. But I don't see anyone else. I honestly don't see anyone else that could take the position, be guaranteed of his place in the side. We're in an era where there's a lot of difference happening. There's a lot of change in the game. You know, a few years ago, you'd have never thought that someone like Pat Cummins could make an outstanding Australian captain being a fast bowler, because you'd be worried about his workload. Well, within 6 months, I've seen in Pat Cummins an outstanding captain, an outstanding leader, and who's to say in 6 months' time we won't be saying exactly the same about Ben Stokes.